I think you definitely need somebody who has the risk tolerance enough to like get off the ground. I still make a ton of mistakes. We probably made like 100 offers, seriously, 100 offers, and then 2 got accepted immediately. I keep going. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that you learn from running and starting a business is we have a lot to lose, and people around us understand that we have a lot to lose. I think the more honest you are about what you don't know or what you're trying to figure out will build accountability and trust with the people. Building a business is a mess. You just got to ride with it.
Welcome back to the Investing RN podcast. Today we are joined by Stephanie Betters out of North Carolina. We're excited to have you on the show and talk some real estate because obviously that's what we do. So we always get excited with our real estate guests. FNP, or is it? I'm NP. I'm guessing it's FNP, but
adult NP.
Adult NP. Okay.
Yeah.
But not doing that anymore as of a couple years ago. But
Yeah.
definitely played a role in where you're at today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this intersection too. Real estate and nursing. This is amazing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background in nursing.
Okay. So I started off as an ICU and ER nurse. I kind of did both. I worked for 5 years and then went to grad school to be an NP. Kind of in the mix of that is where I got introduced to real estate too. And going into real estate honestly was never on the radar for me. I met my now husband in undergrad. He was pre-med and I was nursing in upstate New York, in Binghamton, New York. And we got married right out of college and couldn't afford anything, ton of debt, trying to figure out what we were going to do for grad school. He decided he was going to go on to be a PA instead of going to med school. And I was like, I just want to get married, have babies, and live happily ever after. I don't know. He was like, well, this is an '07. He's like, oh, well, people make money by flipping houses. Like you buy a foreclosed house, there's a show on each TV, and then like you just make money. So like you just print it basically. I was like, okay, well, this was not, these types of houses is not what I imagined living in. You know what I mean? But we didn't have any money, and he convinced me to buy this foreclosed house in '07, which everyone thought was going to be an amazing idea, right? We lived it. We got the mold and everything crazy out of it before we moved into it, but we lived in it and flipped it and sold it right before the crash, like within 2 weeks of the crash, and went off to grad school. So it was crazy timing, but after we did that, we made a good amount of money on that first deal. I think we made like, I don't know, 60K. It was like mind blowing how much money you could make on a house, right? Like we were making that a year at that time. So to make that in the house, we're like, oh my gosh, that was great. But then we went off to grad school on Long Island and was very busy with him in PA school, me in NP school. And I was still working as a nurse in the ER there, like trying to make ends meet while he was in PA school. And so we're not going to do it while we're here, but we decided, he's like, we got to do it again. All right, maybe when we don't have to live in the house, we can do it again, So after we graduated grad school in 2011, we were just trying to figure out where we were going to go and where we could, get great jobs and potentially reboot the real estate stuff. And we picked Charlotte specifically because we found there was no immediate competition with med school here with residency programs. So it was great for advanced practice providers like us. And the real estate market was awesome. We looked at, what was happening in Winston-Salem and Raleigh and Jacksonville. And it felt like Charlotte was going to follow in those footsteps. It did really well in the '08 crash. Like it didn't adjust too much and it was still growing. So when we moved here, we're like, okay, let's move here. We'll buy a house. If it appreciates like we think it's going to appreciate, we'll take a home equity line of credit out and then we'll start our real estate business. And that's what we did. It's kind of the beginning of it all. So it was really his idea in the beginning, and then I totally got addicted.
Yeah, it's the same with us. Yeah, it's definitely addicting. Especially once you see that first pretty good sized check come through the door.
I was gonna say, going back to just like your nursing history, doing ER and ICU, those are seem to be like the two biggest units in the hospital that clash. So how did you?
I know, right?
How did you do both? Where did you start?
Which one was
ICU
better? Is what he's trying to ask.
Josh was ICU.
Who am I really?
Yeah,
it's funny. I think I'm probably a combination of both because I'm logical and I like a plan.
Who are you saying isn't logical?
ER obviously is not.
Yeah, I like my IV lines to be straight. Yeah. But I loved the adrenaline of the ER. I still miss it, to be honest. So it's funny, as an NP, I settled in, my dream job was cardiac surgery. So it's literally the mix of both of them, where you have like just really, really critical moments, a lot of great intervention, like at the bedside, but then the critical care aspect of getting them through recovery and through the CCU journey. And so in the end, both skill sets came together for me, and that was perfect. But I love aspects of both of them as an RN,
Which one do you think helped you more as you got into the business world, or which like personality do you think lended itself better to business and what you're doing now with real estate?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think maybe some of the risk taking aspect of being an ER nurse helped, right? Like not knowing the full story yet, but starting somewhere. Like a big old trauma rolls in, you're like, oh my God, what? I don't know what the diagnosis is yet, but I've got to like start doing something, right? That was really helpful for getting off the ground. But then what I really like is systems and operations in the end, like being able to predict what's going to work and then executing against that. I learned a lot from ICU. Like, okay, now we have a plan, and this is what we're gonna do, and then like we're gonna knock it out.
Yeah.
So it's funny, both contributed.
Well, that's such a great analogy, because it's like that's exactly what it is. It's like you have to be, that analysis paralysis, a lot of ER nurse type people would not experience. And that's how we got started. Josh and I, well, and it's funny too, because Josh's sister is my wife, and the three of us run our company together. And her and I did ER and Josh did ICU. But I would say Josh and I have more of the personality of like, yeah, we don't really know what we're doing, but let's just do it anyways. And then now, as we've gotten into business, like Jen, my wife, is like much more the organized type, and she's the one who basically put together all our systems and everything. Yeah, it's like you kind of need both aspects of it to be able to get going in this thing. So kind of an
And
interesting thing.
I think you definitely need somebody who has the risk tolerance enough to like get off the ground. But then I think what sustains you the most is the operations, because otherwise you just feel
Allegedly.
crazy.
Allegedly.
I'm with your wife, okay?
Yeah.
I gotta go. She's the most important one.
most people are, and whether or not we'll admit it, we've admitted it regularly, but we know she's the most important one. We don't tell her to her face, but we say it here on the podcast, so it's up to her whether or not she listens.
That's funny. But sometimes even if you just have the operations person, you can then analyze something to death too, and and before you know it, you pared your business down to almost nothing, So you definitely need both.
Yeah, I think the other thing that when you're talking about why you guys picked the area you're in is that there were not as many residency programs. So is that kind of a direct competitor to PAs and NPs as you're looking for a job?
It can be, yeah, because especially inpatient. So even though I'm an adult NP, the whole acute care NP wasn't really a thing when I first went to NP school. In when was it? 2010-ish, 2009. Let me do my math real quick. It feels like forever ago now, but that really wasn't a thing. Everyone was like, "Oh, don't do that. That's too specialized." But I always wanted to do inpatient. So when I was looking at inpatient programs, especially surgical programs, if you were an APP, advanced practice person, and at a provider, not person, at one of those that was funny. At one of those practices, then typically the residents got more OR time, and then they have residency program markers and goals that they need to hit. So it can be competitive in that sense. Like, okay, we need to make sure the residents get the hours that they need and the procedures and things that they need. So it's not truly a competitor, but kind of indirectly. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that I could get a really great inpatient job and be able to do procedures and have autonomy and things like that too.
I think that's similar to when I went back to CRNA school. Also, that was one of the only questions I asked the programs I interviewed at. And I mean, being completely honest, I wouldn't have said no if the answer was yes. There are residents in the training, but that was kind of important because as a CRNA student, I didn't want residents taking all of like the difficult cases
Intubations, yeah,
or anything, yeah, because I want to be exposed to as many difficult things as possible. Because I don't know, I guess it's probably very similar to MP and CRNA school. Any advanced practice school. Yeah. All right. So you took a pause while you were in MP school and didn't do any more real estate until you were finished. and you kind of started diving back into that pretty soon after you finished. Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, it was a couple years after, and really the only reason there was a little bit of a delay is that we had kids. So, my first was born in '09, and then 2012 and 2014. So I waited until our baby was like 6 months old or so before I was like, okay, now I'm ready. But it was just a real hectic time with starting our careers and having super young children. So we waited until we settled, and it worked out because we wanted to wait a few years anyway, because we were hoping that our house would appreciate in value over a couple years, because we didn't have cash to play with. Like, like the money that we made off of our flip, we put into a CD, and it basically funded part of us going to grad school and then buying a house. Right. So once we bought a house to live in, and it wasn't anything extravagant, it was just enough. Like by the time it was all said and done, it was enough to have a down payment and like buy some furniture, because we spent some of it in grad school, and we had taken out all these loans. Like we started our careers together basically with like over $200,000 in student loan debt, and we had young kids. I was like, okay, we just need a minute, and then we needed that time to for the house to appreciate, so we would be able to have any cash to invest. After I think it was like 2.5 years or so, our house appreciated enough that we could take $20,000 out in a line of credit that we could now do something with. And that felt like just an insane amount of money at the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, we can't mess this up. This is $20,000. But so we kind of had to wait to create a little bit of margin for ourselves, both personally and cash wise.
Before you got like jumped into this new thing, was there anything you guys saw in 2009 before the crash that happened, or anything you guys took from that experience that you implemented in your new investing, or like caution you took because of what had happened in '09?
Yeah, so I definitely saw that the luxury market got hit the hardest, and that the first time home buyer market, the median sales price and below was pretty stable. And in Charlotte, it corrected, 5 to 8%, depending on where you were at and, relative closeness to the city, to the epicenter of Charlotte. So when we were looking at markets and when we were trying to figure out where our comfort zone was going to be, we made that decision based on how things responded and corrected in '08. So like, okay, if that was catastrophic and no one saw that coming, well, very few people saw that coming, and everybody lost everything. How do we not do that? Like, we assume that this is going to happen again. So how do we stay safe? And so we decided when we started that we were going to stay in that kind of first time home buyer, entry level home market. And we have ever since. Now it's 10 years later since we started our company. And we've always operated in the median sales price or lower as far as resale value or purchase price for rentals.
So that's very similar to, I live in Green Bay, and the market here, I didn't live here at the time, but a lot of the realtors I worked with said that Green Bay corrected maybe 10%. What do you think are the differences between these markets and the markets that took a 40% dive, like Phoenix and LA? What are the differences between those that makes them stable?
I think demand is a big deal. Are people moving to that area? Are there jobs? Are those employers stable through a crash like that? Charlotte has a ton of new movers coming in here every day, and in 2014, when we were first looking at like when we were launching, there was 75 new people moving in a day to Charlotte. I mean, and it's only gone up since then. So we felt really safe because there was such job demand and such regional demand. And we have big employers like Wells Fargo and Bank of America, plus big hospital systems here too that were huge employers. And then there was more and more activity of employers bringing jobs here and stuff. So I felt safe that this area would continue to grow. And I think the places that got the biggest hit were the ones that lost jobs, or employers had to move, or less people wanted to move there for whatever reason, right? I think there's political ramifications for that. There's employer ramifications. There's a lot of reasons, right? So when you're looking at evaluating a market, that is a good sign. Is when there's lots of growth and lots of new movers there, for long-term stability.
And did you relocate to Charlotte for your healthcare jobs, or was this because this is where you saw as a good place to be in real estate investing?
Both. There was truly, it had to make sense for both. We wanted to restart our real estate company, so it had to make sense from that standpoint. And then it needed to make sense from our medical careers, and we needed to be near an international airport. That was the that was a kicker because our family was all over the place, and we wanted to be able to travel easily. So
So as you got started again in 2014, um, I would just go out on a limb here and say that you were probably slightly more prepared than we were when we started our real estate journey, because we just kind of saw a house, bought it, and we're just like, all right, we'll figure it out as we go.
This can't go wrong.
We're like, we got this. But did you guys start by, setting up an LLC and kind of start with the structure first before you went out and start buying things, or did you guys just kind of get going in it?
it wasn't a ton of thought. I wish there was more. I'm trying to think if we had I think we did have an LLC. But we wrote a little business plan. Like, okay, what are we trying to do here? And I'll never forget, like, sitting at the kitchen table with my husband trying to write down, like, okay, wouldn't it be crazy if we made $300,000 a year in this business? And we're like, that's too much. What? No, we're never going to hit that goal. So we did like sit down and try to make a goal of, like, okay, what does success look like? What's our long term? We don't have to do this in a year, but let's grow this thing over 30 years or over 18 years, when our oldest, or at the time when our youngest, would be going out to college. Like, how do we get there? So we did have a little bit of thought with that. And then we got approved for a home equity line of credit. And then we just went out and just made a ton of offers. And the first couple offers we made were super scary. And then no one ever accepted our offers because they were so low, and we were offering on MLS and trying to figure out, we were on the bigger pockets thing too. And like trying to figure out how to make offers on properties and doing the calculator, and then nobody accepted it. And then it got to a point where we were just blowing out offers. Like, okay, screw it. I'm not going to get emotionally involved with this offer anymore. And so we probably made like 100 offers, and seriously, 100 offers, and then 2 got accepted immediately. And we're like at the same time, because we were making so many. And one was for a rental, and one was for a flip. And then we were like, well, shoot, we can't afford both, but what do we do? So we used part of our home equity line of credit to get a loan on that rental, like a traditional mortgage. And they're like, well, crap, like, we're not going to be able to do that very often, because that just took all our cash. And then we're going to make, what, a couple $100 a month on this rental? Like, this is going to take forever. So we had to figure out a way to fund that flip when we had it under contract. So it's really funny. My husband was working in urgent care. I was in heart surgery. He's in urgent care. And he was just like, chewing the fat with his patient, just stitching this guy's head open, head closed in urgent care. And it's like, real estate. And they're just talking real estate. He's like, yeah, we just got this flip under contract. He's like, oh, I'm a private money lender. I fund those kinds of things. And he's like, oh, really? We actually need a lender for this deal. We just got under contract. He's like, oh, I'll be a lender. Yeah, let's talk about it. And show me the deal. And the guy ends up funding the deal. It's like kind of crazy. So we didn't really know what the heck we were going to do. We were kind of scrambling to try to figure out how we could get another loan. And oh my gosh, we're trying to get hard money. So we didn't quite have a plan on how we were going to take them down, but then just going out and trying to figure it out, it kind of worked out. So
It's kind of
talk about what you do.
Story. Yeah.
I know, is that silly? Yeah,
That's crazy.
But the same thing ended up happening for private money lenders in the future with me. Although I think it definitely took longer for me. But I would be in the OR or in the ICU, taking care of patients, talking to my colleagues about what we were doing. People were super interested, and a bunch of the physicians I worked with ended up being private money lenders. And they all did fantastic. They're like, this is the easiest money I've ever made. This thing was just sitting in here in my bank account, and now I got a great return on it. They're like, thank you. This is amazing. Can we give you more? I'm like, well, I guess. Buy more houses.
If you insist.
So, yeah, right. Twist my arm. But yeah.
I think that's kind of powerful, because that was something that we ran into when we were first starting also, is because we didn't want to make too many offers, because we're like, what if they all get accepted? Then we wouldn't know what to do with them. And we had a lot of problems when we were first starting. That wasn't the biggest problem, but it was there. It was definitely something that we thought about and talked about. But I guess if you're making the right offers, something good will come of it, because you could always wholesale it for a small margin or something else. You don't have to close on all of them yourself.
Right. And we did learn that later. I mean, we had taken down all these flips. We had bought just that one rental that year, and then the rest we were flipping to try to get more money to buy more rentals. And our crews were super backed up and it was super stressful. And then we got these other deals and we were like, oh, well, what's this wholesaling thing? So then we were able to wholesale a couple deals. But I think what's really important that I think we minimize because we just take it for granted, but we have a lot to lose and people around us understand that we have a lot to lose. So that creates this accountability with potential funding partners at the hospital or wherever you're working, right? Like I'm not going to commit fraud and rob somebody because I'm going to lose my medical license on top of it, right? Like we have a lot, we're super accountable and these people see us and they work with us every day. They know we're reliable. They know we're hard workers. They know we're smart or whatever, right? That we've become friends with these colleagues. They are very likely to be interested in what you're doing and to partner with you on it. And that's something I totally took for granted until it happened. So, but we're in a really unique position being in nursing or being in, being advanced practice. Like we're exposed to a lot of high net worth individuals too, who are interested in real estate and they want to be a part of it, and they trust you.
And it doesn't make sense for them to put their time into learning real estate either because their income is so high. Might as well just give it to you or to us or something that can make them a good return.
Oh, he's saying that they like to delegate the hard work to
Of
somebody else?
course.
Excuse me. They want to give those enemas themselves. They would much rather.
Oh my goodness. That'll be the day.
I think one of the things we struggled with early on in that, because we didn't really get into private money borrowing until more recently. But just like you were mentioning, talking about it with people you're working with, I think I was always, and Josh, I know Josh is the same way. We were always hesitant to talk about it because we weren't super confident in what we were doing. And part of that, I think, went back to not having the right systems in place, not really even knowing what our business was doing, but then also like not knowing what a good offer was. Like what kind of percentage should we offer? Should we be offering equity? Should we just be offering a straight percentage return? So I guess like what did you do or like to kind of gain that confidence to be able to go out there and talk to these people and feel like you were going to be a good steward of their money?
Well, I definitely felt like I had to figure some things out first, but I think what really resonated with me is really understanding that there are really only two American dreams that like pretty much every single American is interested in. And that's number one is real estate, and number two is owning a restaurant. Like everyone like romanticizes those two things. Like, wouldn't it be great to own a bakery? Wouldn't it be great to like own rentals or flip houses? Everybody is interested in that. So once I realized that almost everybody I talked to was like, "Oh, that's cool. Tell me what you're doing," that I started leaning into that more and more and becoming less afraid to talk about it. And then I realized I don't have to necessarily know everything that I'm doing, but I can share my story with the people around me, and they're number one are interested in even just being a part of the story. I don't have to ask them for anything. I can just kind of share, just like I would share what my kids are up to, share what I'm up to. Like, oh, I'm looking for this house. I don't know what I'm doing. Just be if you don't know what you're doing, you can still say you don't know what you're doing. But oh, I'm figuring it out, and then like update them along the way, just like you would with anything else. And I think that number one lets people be aware of what you're doing so they can watch you, because a lot of people will want to watch you over time before they ever lend you any money. They want to hear about your story for 2 years or more before they're like, you know what, I've seen you do this. I've seen you now flip a bunch of houses. How do we do this together? Just because they know that you've been doing it. Had you had waited 2 years to have all of your perfect systems in a row before you ever felt confident enough to talk to somebody, they would then want to wait another 2 years to like just watch you. So might as well just let them watch you grow and share your story and expect nothing. Just share your story, and you'd be surprised how many people come through. And then don't be afraid to ask. Be like, hey, you seem super interested. Do you want to be in on a deal? If you do, like, I'm happy to talk to you more about this. And again, don't expect anything, but just offer it up like you can come in and we can do this together if you're super interested, and talk about it and just be honest. I think the more honest you are about what you don't know or what you're trying to figure out will build accountability and trust with the people that you're talking to. But also, you'd be surprised just verbalizing what you don't understand or what you need, how resources just kind of come together. Like if you're trying to figure out, I don't know, like I need an electrician. I don't know what the heck is going on with this house. And you just talk about it. someone will be like, oh, I got a guy actually came to my house. Like you make connections like that just by sharing what the heck you're messing up or you don't understand. Like the universe will just all of a sudden give it to you. So don't do anything in secret or because you don't feel like you know the answer. You don't have to know the answer.
That's one of the reasons we started getting a little bit more into social media and in the podcast. It's because we do, I mean, we've all been on social media, but actually posting on social media, kind of our growing, our learning path or whatever it's called. Part of the reason is because we see a lot of people that are, you can kind of tell they're faking, but they're like really good at faking. So that was one of the biggest reasons we wanted to start something, is because we're not faking. um, but yeah, like a lot of people don't see what it's actually like to build a business or to grow a real estate company. It's because it's pretty difficult. It's not the easiest thing we've ever done, that's for sure. And I think a lot of people see, or they think it's a lot easier than it really is. And I mean, it's doable and it's worth it, but it's not easy like a lot of people would want you to think.
Right. And I think you share your journey and that normalizes it too for people. Like, oh, maybe I can figure it out too.
Yeah, well, and that's I think one of the big things we were trying to accomplish, because I think it's hard. Like we always talk about bigger pockets, just because that was a big influence for us as we were beginning in real estate. And Brandon Turner obviously was a big motivator for us, but it was always kind of hard to tell, like, okay, where did his journey actually begin, and like how long's he been doing this, and where, what were the steps along the way. And then it wasn't until he started his own podcast that it was like, oh yeah, it was like 10 years before I really took off. And I actually started this early in my life. And so I think that's like one of the things that we're like so interested in sharing now, is just like, it's totally worth it. And it's very rewarding, but it is a lot of work and it does take time. And it's not just like this get rich quick thing.
I don't think we ever thought it was going to be easy. What we really not messed up on, but what we kind of were unexpecting was how long it would take for the wheel to start rolling faster and faster and faster. We always knew it wouldn't be easy, but we thought we could get it done a lot faster.
I think even more reason to start as soon as you can, because it just takes a ton of time and you're just going to mess up. And I still mess up all the time. Like I make mistakes. I'm like, oh, dang it. I should have seen that coming. You know what I mean? I still make a ton of mistakes. But I keep going. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that you learn from running and starting a business, is normalizing just how much pain you have to push through and how much it sucks to just keep and building something from nothing, especially if you come from like kind of this academic side where like you have a path forward and you have a chain of command and you have like, and then you just start completely fresh, like I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel like I'm just making it up. Well, yeah. You're
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah.
feel that way.
And in healthcare, there's not a lot of room for error.
Right.
Like
Right.
like it's not really acceptable to make mistakes. I was just going to ask about your path of progression. So you started back in 2013-ish, it sounds like. What did the first few years like, and then what does your business look like now?
Gosh, it's funny. I would never would have imagined this, but so our first year, we made a ton of offers. We bought a rental, and then we started flipping. And then everything kind of went very quickly from there. Our very first year, we ended up doing like 11 or so transactions, flipping and then wholesaling. So we our original plan was we were doing this just to buy rentals, but we realized very quickly that we would have to stack a lot more cash to be able to afford to buy and hold rentals, because you put a bunch of money in, it takes forever to make anything, right? Like we're excited if we make $200 a door a month, but we just dumped 30K into a property. Like just the math, it's going to take forever for that to, for that wheel to make sense. So, and we just didn't have the extra cash to be able to do that. So we had to flip. And then the flipping got busy, so we started wholesaling. And so then we were doing flipping and wholesaling, and we didn't buy a rental for like 5 years because we just like we got totally sidetracked having to build this other machine. And at the time, we had young kids. My youngest at the start was 6 months old or so when we first started our business, and we decided, okay, none of us want to leave medicine. I don't want to, I love my job. I don't want to leave, but this is a full-time gig. And the whole idea was to have passive income from rentals, but we're not going to be able to have passive income from rentals at any meaningful rate in order to achieve our goals. And our goals were, hey, let's like buy 3 houses per person in our family so that we would have money for weddings and college and retirement, And we're like, okay, that math doesn't work. We're gonna have to stack a lot more cash in order to do that. So we're not gonna have the passive income we want. So we kind of had to make this decision. Do we passively own a company? Like, what if we built the company to do it while we were still working, and then we would like spin off rent, being able to buy rentals from the cash flow of a company instead. And this is where like the addiction kind of came in, because I'll take responsibility. That was my idea, and I took us off on this whole journey to come back to the plan of just buying rentals. But my husband kind of was along for the ride, I guess. But so we started building out the team. So we brought on lead manager VA, and we brought on acquisition reps and project managers and transaction coordinators, and before you know it, we had a whole team, and we were just marketing. And then that team, it took forever for that team to kind of get to a place where it was passive, probably 5-6 years before we even took a profit and could start buying rentals again. And that hurt. Like that 5-6 year process was really, really scary, because we were super all in. Like, this thing could not fail, because all of our cash was tied into that, right? We had a home equity line. Like, it was a lot. So it was, those years felt extremely desperate and scary, and like, we can do it, right? We can do it, right? But once we got past that phase of building out a team and a business, we like, okay, now we can buy rentals again. Like, maybe we should buy rentals. That was the whole plan. And then we were able to slowly start building our portfolio back. So, kind of a long story, I apologize. But now what our team looks like is we have 12 team members, most of which have been with us 5-6 years or more. Our team has been with us a long time now, and that company depends a little bit on the year, but anywhere between 100 and 200 transactions a year. We don't flip anymore. Instead of flipping, we build houses. We build single family residential in like spec houses in Charlotte and in the surrounding area, and we wholesale. And then the profit that we take from that company as owners, we go out and we buy either single family houses here in Charlotte or multifamily. It's like syndication deals where we'll be GPs, or there's a couple that we're LPs on too, all over the Southeast. And yeah, secondarily to that, and kind of surprisingly to that, solving a lot of those systems and operations problems in Better Path Homes, our investment company. I developed a CRM solution to help run our business, because there wasn't one that would help us. So I built that, and Salesforce asked to partner and bring that to market with Salesforce. So I did. That was in 2020. And I launched that company called Left Main REI. And telling you offline, it's named after your left main coronary artery, because that's your lifeline. Because I'm a dork, and heart surgery
Kind of
had to be part of
important.
that. That's important, because it was like the center of our wheel. Like, we really needed great systems and operations to be able to work full time at the hospital and run that company and be a wife and a mother and a father for my husband. Like, it took a lot of systems development in order to do all those things. So now our real estate investment business, my husband runs that full time, and spends a few hours a week on that business. And then I run our software business full time, and that's a little bit of a younger company. So I spend 40 hours a week for sure on that side. But now we have those two companies and a decent sized portfolio 10 years later. And
There it is, the 10 years.
yes.
Yeah. Well, so I think, something that you mentioned was how that 5 to 6 years or whatever, that period while you were building the company, and you're just wondering, like, is this, I'm sure you're wondering, is this worth it? Is this going to pan out in the long run? And I think that's something that my wife and I especially went through, because we took a step back from nursing for a number of reasons, but we were out of nursing for a couple of years while we were really trying to build the company and the property management side of things. And I'm a lot more just kind of laid back and just like, things will work themselves out. But my wife, and we had a young child at the time, was a lot more stressed about where is this going, and to this day is still kind of like wondering, where is this going? Is this worth all our time that we're putting into it? Should we be investing our time elsewhere? And now it's like we're finally getting to the point now, we're 4 or 5 years into it, where like our gross rents are up. We're like, oh wow, like this is actually kind of impressive what we've built. And we're now she can see it, but like for you, as you were going through that, especially with the kids, because I know that was a big stress for my wife and myself included, what I guess motivated you, or what kept you going and pushing forward to keep this thing moving?
Because I thought it could be done in the end, and I wanted to build it. Like I wanted to achieve the goal that we set out to do. In the end, that was the biggest reason why I kept doing it, because I said we could in the beginning. Like, dang it, this was the plan. Okay, like we were like this had to we have to be able to figure this out. But in the end, that was it. I mean, was I doing it for our family? Of course. But like then if you're doing it just for your family and then you're spending time away from your family to build stuff, then you quickly are like, well, shoot, this is taking me away from my family. Why am I doing this? I think it has to meet all the check boxes, right? Yes, you have to do it for your family. We're doing it to enrich our lives and to give ourselves more freedom and more time and all those things too. But also because there's something else like burning inside you, right? Like I want to do this. Like I want to achieve this. And I think that is in the end what really made me hold on to it, because there's a billion other reasons to stop, you know? But I was just like, I'm going to do it because it's there, because I can.
Yeah. And we all do this to either, I guess, give ourselves more time or more money. And I think when you're first starting, you're going to lose one of those. Whichever one you want more of, you're going to lose it for a little while before you're able to gain that much more of it when you're all finished with it. I think that's a challenge that I would say most people are probably not willing to make.
Right, exactly. And it's hard because it does mean you sacrifice time with your family, and in the end it's rewarding. But if you tell yourself, hey, this is the only reason why I'm doing it, then like stop doing it, because you're gonna miss time with the kids, right? Like it's and I have a lot of mom guilt with that. So I'm not saying that lightly in any way, but I had to have something else alongside my why of building this legacy for my family, because in the end, like you have to sacrifice a bit of that for a few years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it in the long term, it's like obviously I'm sure now it's paying off and you're seeing the
Oh, for
benefits of
sure.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I,
For sure.
I think I was listening to this it's called the Mind Shift Pod. It's this guy Erwin McManus out of LA, and he was talking about knowledge and belief, and I think that's like he was saying, like, if you have the knowledge to do something but you don't have the belief, and I'm going to mess this up, but essentially he was saying if you have the knowledge to do something, what separates like people that are successful from people that aren't is like maybe you have the same knowledge, but it's that belief that separates you from somebody else. And it sounds like it was that belief in what you were doing, that it was going to pay off one day, that got you to where you are now. Keeps you going, I guess.
I think a little of that I think everyone needs a little bit of fire in their belly to be able to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's tough.
So what does your current portfolio look like today? And you're still doing, I think you already said this, I might have forgotten, but you're still doing quite a few transactions. But then what does your total portfolio look like? And then I want to ask you about the Left Main
Yeah.
business.
We've bought and sold quite a bit with the boom here in 21 and 22. So our portfolio is a little shaken up because we sold and exited a couple great deals, but we own about 20 or so single families here in Charlotte, and then combined like doors for multifamily, probably around 800.
Is
And
that
those
through
are
syndication?
Yeah, it's both. So these are large multifamily, so they'll be like 150 units, 80 unit, multiple deals like that, where we're for the most part GPs in that. So we're general partners. It means that we're the owners of it, alongside with LPs that we've brought into the deal to raise the delta between the bank financing and the down payment and the flip of the property. But I am an LP in I think two of those deals as well. So it sounds like a ton of doors. I don't 100% own those doors, but I'm in on those big deals. So we're a little bit diverse.
Okay, and then the Left Main REI that you partnered with Salesforce, that's kind of a big deal. So what is that business, and what made it so desirable for a company like Salesforce to want to come in and partner with it?
So Salesforce had a really hard time with selling into the real estate vertical, like just the industry segment in general. They only closed like 3% of those types of deals a year. And they saw what I had built, and I was the chief developer. I mean, I taught myself how to code and built it for our company, thinking like this is going to be our solution. But Salesforce reached out to me afterward and was like, "Oh, can I see what you built?" I was like, sure. There's a little bit of a story behind that, because Salesforce tried to sell me this big developer package to have somebody build what I wanted, and it was astronomically high. It was like $1 million, literally, for them to build what I wanted to build for a CRM. And I like lost my mind. Like I can never run for public office because I freaked out on the Zoom call. I was like, what are you talking about? $1 million? How hard can this be? And I was like, I'll just build it myself. So I kind of talked all kinds of smack, and then they followed up with me later and they're like, oh, did you give up? And I'm like, no, I built it. Done. And then they're like, oh, can I see it? And I showed them, and they're like, this is really cool. I think you should talk to our partner team. Like, are you interested? And I kind of accidentally stumbled into that. And I was like, yeah, I'll do this, but this is what I want. I want to be able to sell it for $50 a user. It needs, like, I want to have full control of the sales process. I want my contract to look like this. And they're like, okay.
How much time from between that first conversation where you very calmly and collectively told them no way? And then how long did it take for them to reach back out and you had already built it?
I was so professional. It took me about 3 months to build, like, and I did that nonstop because I had to learn a whole thing. I had to learn how to code and how to operate on the Salesforce platform and stuff. So it took me 3 full months to do it. And then probably a month after I finished, they reached out. So 4 months, and then another 3-4 months before like all the contract negotiation stuff was done. So that brought us to January 2020, which is when it finally, like, it passed and all the signatures were done, and we passed through like the security review and things like that. So
And so what does this provide for a user?
yeah, so it's not for beginners. It's for people who have a team, that generally people at least have a total of 5 people on their team. This is not a hard, fast rule, but generally, these are people that are marketing and have a team and like want to scale a business. But essentially, it's a center of the wheel for your entire real estate operation. It's for people who are buying fix and flips and wholesaling and buying rentals at scale, or doing all the things. So it takes you from marketing to off-market properties and managing all of your marketing campaigns and lead sources, to managing the leads and people who have raised their hand, to your sales process, to transaction coordination, and then project management. So it's kind of the whole life cycle of the deal and the transaction. But it's primarily for people who are doing it like many transactions a month, like 1 or 2 deals a year. It's just too much. You don't necessarily need this big of a system. But if you're running a full operation, you're doing 5+ deals a month, and you're trying to scale, then this thing will help get you there.
And how many investors have you helped through the software now at this point over the last 4 years? I guess it would be
A little over 3,000.
3,000 investment companies who have a total of like an average of 5 employees each or more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. So you got
a lot of users.
Decent amount of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we do a lot of deals with Salesforce too, which is cool. So I get a little mix of the corporate life and selling with corporate. It's cool.
As far as your real estate business, you said your husband's running that mostly now. How did you guys kind of figure out who was going to do what within your real estate company, and now just in general in your marriage?
I know. Let me talk about marriage here for a second. So he was the CEO and I was a COO, and we ran that way for a while, 6-7 years ish. And it created this like erosion of business and personal life, to where all we did was talk about business. Like, it is so all consuming, right? And we are an amazing team. I love him so much. He's amazing. Like, we are a really great team. Kind of like you described your wife, like, oh, you're laid back and she's not. Like, somehow these people find each other, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing with him. He's very visionary oriented, and I'm like, okay, well, how are we gonna do this? Like, let's build it. I'm the builder. But it just happened that like we almost always just talked about business. I was like, this is really stressful. I need to be able to unwind and disconnect too, and he should too. And I started getting like just kind of pissed. Like, I am trying to brush my teeth, and you're talking to me about like lead sources or whatever. I'm like, I can't, I can't. This is crazy, you know. Like, I want to be your wife, not just your business partner. But it was really hard because we worked really well together and we like got it done. But we decided like, hey, there needs to be a time where I can step out and not be the operator anymore, primarily because he was incredibly full of ideas on how to grow the business. And I started becoming a little bit resentful. I'm like, don't give me another idea because we're just trying to execute the last 50 ideas that you gave me, so I started getting a little salty about it. And I was very open about it. I know I was salty about it. So I was like, I think what's probably best is that we hire, like we promote somebody to take my job as the COO, and then I'll just kind of step back a little bit. And just at that time, it was literally perfect timing because that's when Left Main and like the whole Salesforce thing was coming together. So we promoted our project manager, name's Matt, to my position as COO, just as Salesforce signed this agreement with Left Main. So I was like, maybe this is all kind of serendipitous. Like we can still work really, like we can work closely together, but not like actively together, if that makes sense. And then Matt was the perfect person for that role. So I kind of went out into the owner's box and was still very involved, especially in the beginning with training Matt and like getting everything settled. But then a lot of my attention day to day focused on the software, which he totally understood and got, and like obviously helped better path. So it kind of became this like board of directors type relationship with each other. And that turned out to be really great for our marriage too. Both of our businesses are thriving. Obviously, we're both co-owners like in all of it, but the focus and the leadership on each of our businesses worked really well personally because now we understand each other where they're coming from, but we're not in the day to day with each other, so that his stress and what's happening and on his team is like, oh, that sucks. What's for dinner? Like I don't have to be the one to solve it. You know what I'm saying? And vice versa for him too. So I think everybody's different, but that worked really, really well for us. And my general advice is if you're working with your spouse is put some sort of time limit on how many years you're going to do that, and be really clear on your roles and responsibilities, because like being an entrepreneur, it just takes over your mind and takes over all the things, and you just have to have boundaries. And in the beginning it's a mess, and like it just is what it is. Building a business is a mess. You just got to ride with it. But when you start stabilizing 5, 6, 10 years out, like I think it's good to have a line in the sand. Like, okay, we're not going to actively do this anymore together, or we're gonna allocate roles a little bit differently or something. But everyone's different, so the way we did it is not for everybody, but that helped.
Well, yeah, I mean,
seems to have worked out pretty nicely.
Yeah.
But I mean, that sounds so familiar for us, and I think the thing that really was hard for me, or that's been hard for me, is just it's like it was one thing for the two of us to just kind of be like all consumed with it and talking about it all the time, and that would definitely wear on us at times. We're still heavily involved with it, but I think the tough thing was there would be times when we'd be eating dinner and our 3-year-old sitting there, or 2, whatever age she was at the time, and we're just like so focused on what we're supposed to be doing, because sometimes that's the only time you have where you sit down together and you can talk. And so we're sitting at the dinner table and we're just like talking about business, and then like the kid's over here acting up and we're getting frustrated with the kid, but it's like she's just like wants attention from the two of us, and it's like we're trying to catch up on business. So it's definitely not an easy thing. Like I see these people building businesses without kids, and I'm like, oh man, that would have been a great idea to do this before kids.
Right. And
But,
it's stress. There's a level of stress that's just different. Even coming from super stressful jobs, it's still more, in my opinion, it was way more stressful to build a business than to go take care of somebody like 2 minutes post-op, heart surgery. Like I would lose sleep over real estate stuff well before I would lose sleep over patients. Like I'd be on call, be like, yep, give 9 units of blood, and then like fall right back asleep. But then someone calls me about a roof leaking. I'm like, oh my God, the world is ending. It was like, and my husband would laugh at me. He'd be like, you literally fell asleep after giving the most intense order ever, right? Because he would be next to me getting all these calls. And like, you fall asleep with that, but you're freaking out over this. I'm like, I know, I don't know why, but it's so much harder, I don't know. But I think maybe we're used to it with medicine in some degree. We're desensitized, and when we're building a business, everything seems so scary, and like everything's going to take you down and ruin everyone's life, and you don't have the thick skin yet.
Well, and obviously like lives are on the line in medicine, but it's like ultimately it's not your hospital, it's not your whatever. It's like, but when you're building this business, it's like your little baby, and it's like everything, your success is so heavily tied to it. So it's like,
Well, and it's also, I think the only way I kind of gotta understand it for myself is it's not new for medicine, right? Like I've seen the same scenario with that patient. 100 times. I feel confident on what I need to do to help them, right? Because I've seen a lot of things happen. I have the experience to feel calm in the moment and like do what I need to do. Does that algorithm of if thens potentially end in like a bad outcome of someone passing away? Yes. But I know that's only after like a million of these if then scenarios, right? And I was okay with that with a patient because you kind of have to be. And I think the same thing is true for business. Like, yes, the whole thing could blow up and you could lose a ton of money. Like that could happen at the end. And for some reason when you're starting a business, that's all you focus on is that because you have no experience on the if then things, decision trees between that. And so it feels so much more real just because we don't have that experience muscle grown to handle all those decision trees. You know what I mean? So everything just feels so much more high risk. But so when I kind of center myself like that, because I still have to do this, like crap happens all the time. Like wait till you get sued the first time, and you're like, oh, wait till you sue someone the first time, right? Like everything feels like a disaster, and to this day, I still have to normalize it. Like it only feels super scary because I haven't seen it through before, So like I'm just gonna see it through, and then the next time it happens, I'm gonna feel a lot more calm and in control because I've seen a cycle happen. I've seen whatever happen. I don't know. That's the only thing I can
Yeah,
think of because obviously lives are much more important than a roof,
sure,
but
yeah.
you feel more in control in those scenarios. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I think it goes back to that. It's like the systems and the protocols and the algorithms that have been developed over years and years and years in medicine that you're familiar with, that you're using. And then in real estate, it's like you said, you're hitting this thing for the first time and somebody else has gone through it. But until you experience it and you have those systems and protocols in place, it does feel like a huge thing. And then you figure it out and it's like the next time it's super easy. So, well, this has been great. And I think we could go on and on
I know.
forever, but we gotta be somewhat cognizant of the time. So we're going to move into our final five. Josh, you want to kick it off?
So, our first question in the final five is, what's a top financial resource that you found? Where do you go to educate yourself?
Ooh, housingwire.com I think is really amazing for just like a newsletter that you guys can go read up on market and market trends. And they do a really good job of consolidating a lot of great data, like from CoreLogic and MLS. So I go there often. Housingwire.com, free, great resources to read outside of your CPAs and your other.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, I'm going to look at that one later.
Yeah.
So the second question is, what advice would you give yourself as a new grad?
I think be less afraid and more confident in your ability to figure things out. Like you can learn. And going through nursing school, going through grad school, you learn how to learn. And that same skill will help you on the job when you're brand new to the job. Like you can figure it out. And in other ventures too. You've learned how to learn. And that is probably the number one most important skill set that you have.
All right. Our third question is, what excites you about the next 12 months?
Ooh, I'm really excited about AI and how that's going to play into all of our tech stack. So Left Main, we're developing some cool AI things. How AI is going to change how we interact with homeowners and how we buy houses. I think that's going to really change a lot. Just AI callers and AI texters. It's kind of wild, like how good it is. So the next 12 months, I think we're going to see a lot more advent of AI tech rolling out, and I'm pumped for it.
Before you go to the fourth question, so now that you speak of AI and Salesforce, the only thing that comes to mind is that Matthew McConaughey is like on Salesforce's all of their commercials.
Yeah.
So do you get to hang out with them now since you guys are like all partnered up and all that?
I wish. I thought for a second I might be able to see him at the Dreamfest concert, which was in San Francisco just about a month ago. But no, I'm not that cool. I'm not that cool. Well, one day, put on the vision board.
Soon. Sounds like it's soon.
Yeah, I'm having to become more okay with AI and the realization that it's not yet robots that are going to control our lives. But I mean, it's definitely, and we're not doing a ton of cold calling right now, but we were doing cold calling, and it's like I've seen the way it can be implemented in that part of the business, and it's exciting in a way.
It's
Just
very interesting. And I
exciting.
think you can use it too to analyze deals. It's pretty smart. We can drop spreadsheets and stuff into ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me or not, am I going to get a 20% return on this in 5 years? And it'll tell you. It's kind of wild. So not only with our own operations, but with analyzing stuff, it's getting really good. So I'm excited to see what happens the next year.
We'll see. Let's
I
hope
am
we're
straight.
all.
You look at him, it's like Braden's
He's,
like,
he's scared. Colin is so scared.
I'm looking at a special piece of property. I can't say the location because I don't want the robots to find me, but that's where I'm getting ready to hide just in case.
yes.
But number 4 is, how do you define success?
The number of Saturday mornings that I have with my family making pancakes.
I like that. And why Saturday morning?
Because I worked every weekend or every other weekend for almost 16, 17 years. And so now that I left the hospital about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now, and I've had every Saturday with the kids and at the house. Like, this is what it feels like to have a life. Like, this is amazing. I feel so successful waking up in my house on a Saturday and being like, this is great. I just get to be home.
Yeah, during that time, that couple years where we were out of nursing, my wife and I were managing the building we lived in, and it was nowhere close to the amount of money we were making with nursing. But just this thing of like, every morning we were both home. Every night I could put the kid to bed. Like, it was, for me, that was like success. And obviously, like, you know, I had a wife, so she had higher expectations for life, but and I do too, obviously, but it was like, yeah, in that, just the simplicity of that
Yeah,
one
just
thing is great.
being with people who love you and that you love in return, and like being safe, and together, that is successful.
All right. The 5th question is, what's the biggest financial mistake that you've made, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, gosh, I have a list. I would say a big one recently. We bought a house. We bought land and we built 2 houses, kind of on a little bit of a fringe area around Charlotte called Hickory, North Carolina. And we,
I know it.
you know Hickory? Okay. That's right. It's
Well,
Boone. Yeah.
I used to live in Boone. Yeah.
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 Okay. So our company bought the land, and we we do due diligence before buying the lot. Like, we figure out where the sewer lines are and the city water is, and it's generally right there in the street. We verify all that with the county and like do our surveys or whatever. And the county said, yeah, the taps are there in the street. So we built these 2 houses, and they were done. And all we had to do was make the connection to the city sewer and the city water. And turns out that they were not in the street, that they were 100 feet away. And you have to pay $1,000 a foot to dig that line. And the city was like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know. You should have verified that. So long story short, we built 2 houses, like totally done and finished, and we had to pay $100,000 to dig the line, and we couldn't afford it at the time because like this was in the midst of like the end of 22 when the market was going down. Like, we couldn't we were just trying to contract and like save what was going to happen with the interest rates going up and all this. It was scary. So those houses sat for 2 years before we sold them earlier this year after spending $100,000. So we paid money on like the loan costs of holding those properties, and they were done, perfect houses. Just couldn't sell them because you couldn't flush a toilet, So that was a recent huge mistake that really sucked. And yeah, we lost, over $100,000, probably $150,000 when you account for the lending costs and stuff like that for those houses. And that's after we sold them. We still lost money. So yeah, that sucked.
Yes, sewer, that whole sewer thing. We just bought a park in Nebraska, and it was like city water, city sewer, and I'm like, oh great, we have nothing to worry about. And then get into it, and it's like, oh yeah, so the sewer that the city owns runs down the street,
Yeah.
but then you got to get from there. So it's like, should we have known that? Should that? Yeah, probably, but we didn't. It's not going to ruin us, but it's just another hurdle we got to get over.
Well, we triple check now.
Oh yeah, and we will too.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you and learn more about your businesses and everything you got going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Steph Betters is my handle. You could email me, Stephanie@leftmainrei.com. If you want to learn more about Left Main, go to leftmainrei.com. But I'm out there. You can come over to my Instagram, and we'll hang out.
Well, thanks again, and check her out, and check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the above. Yeah, thanks for joining us.